great. Blake Lively is haunting headlines again, and let's be real. This dumpster fire isn't dying down anytime soon. Right when everyone convinced themselves the epic Blake Lively versus Justin Baldoni showdown was finally limping to a close, Judge Lyman swooped in with an order that screamed, "Oh no, honey." Round 2. And look, I'll be straight with you. I was mid-dinner, stirring something boring, when my phone started exploding like it owed me money. Ping after ping, and the deeper I read, the more it hit me. We are genuinely trapped in this mess forever. So let me rewind, because there's a ton to untangle, and I need you to get the real deal, not the TikTok garbage floating around. Blake Lively filed a motion demanding fees, costs, and damages under California Civil Code Section 47. 1. Confused? Here's the tea. She's begging the court for cash, attorney's fees, and every penny you blew fighting this nonsense. Oh, and on top, she's chasing triple damages plus punitive damages. Yeah, not a humble request. That's Blake swaggering into court like, "I'll take the whole damn store." Meanwhile, Judge Lyman, the most painfully careful judge in this saga, casually dropped a one-page order saying, "Cool, now say it to my face." The hearing is locked for June 1st, 2026 at 2 p.m. at 500 Pearl Street Courthouse in New York. Courtroom 15C, 1 hour total. Each side gets 30 minutes. And honestly, that's so Judge Lyman. Tight, controlled, no nonsense to the bone. Now here's the juicy part nobody's screaming about. In his order, Judge Lyman leads with the phrase, "assuming without deciding." That little gem is carrying the whole circus on its back. Translation: he's not even confirming that Blake can use this law yet. Nope. He's telling the lawyers to show up and fight over whether she can bring this claim at all under the procedural rules being used. And this is massive. Because let's face it, the entire house of cards Blake Lively's team has been leaning on is Section 47. 1. And now Judge Lyman is quite literally raising his hand like a confused student, going, pause. Can she even pull this off? That question is way more important than most people realize. Blake is a California resident suing in a New York federal court, yet the events she's whining about, the filming, the so-called bad behavior, all went down in New Jersey. So why on earth is she wielding a California state law? That's the delicious wrinkle. And Judge Lyman isn't just letting it slide off the table. Oh no, he's slamming it down and demanding, "Someone explain this to me in writing." 2 pages, single-spaced, 12-point font, no footnotes, just the cases you want me to read. The man is hilariously specific about the format, which honestly screams how dead serious he is about this. He doesn't want anyone hiding garbage arguments in footnotes or fluffing up the page count. He wants clean, direct, no BS reasoning. The other enormous question he's throwing out there is about burden of proof. Who has to prove what in this circus? Because depending on whether Blake is just asking for attorney's fees or also chasing triple and punitive damages, that burden could totally shift. And that distinction matters like crazy. If Blake has to carry the weight of proving that the messages she's targeting were not protected under 47. 1. That's a much heavier lift than if Justin Baldoni's side has to prove they were protected. The entire strategy of this case could live or die based on how that question gets answered. Now let's get real about what 47. 1 actually is, and what it was meant to do. It's a California law designed to protect people who report harassment or misconduct. The idea is simple. If you speak up and then get sued for it, you shouldn't have to bleed out financially just defending yourself. You should be able to recover what you lost, and in some cases get triple that amount as a giant middle finger to people who use lawsuits to shut others up. The law has heart, sure. It was built for situations where someone with less power speaks out, and then gets buried in legal fees by someone with way more power. But the way Blake is weaponizing this law, yeah, that's a major stretch to a whole lot of people glued to this train wreck. Take a recent case. A hospital custodian reported a colleague's sexually harassing comments toward her. She got sued for defamation? Case dismissed. A judge ruled she deserved legal fees and damages under that very same California law. But here's the kicker. She settled on the amount and didn't chase triple damages. She didn't try to turn it into some massive payday. She used the law exactly how it was designed. Blake's situation? Completely different beast. She's not a custodian. She's not some powerless soul getting crushed by a giant. She's one of the most famous women in Hollywood, armed with resources, legal armies, and PR machines working 24/7. And she's gunning for triple damages, punitive damages, the whole enchilada. So when Judge Lyman essentially asks, can she even use this law for that purpose? That's not just fair. That's the right damn question. What makes this moment feel so significant? There's almost no case law here. Barely any precedents for Judge Lyman to lean on. Whatever he decides will be what future judges and lawyers cite when this mess comes up again. Blake Lively versus Justin Baldoni is going straight into law books, and Judge Lyman knows it, which is exactly why he scheduled this hearing instead of ruling quietly from his chambers. The fact that he's letting both sides walk in, make their arguments, submit their letters, and be heard, that's him being careful. That's him saying, I'm not making a decision this big without giving everyone a fair shot to speak their piece. And honestly, I respect that about him. He's been consistent through this entire circus. He doesn't care about drama. He cares about getting it right. Now let's get real about what Blake actually wants from all this, because it's worth being honest about the bigger picture. When Blake first filed her complaint against Justin Baldoni, a lot of people read it as someone genuinely coming forward about a difficult on-set experience. The allegations were serious. There was real talk about Hollywood power dynamics, how actresses get treated, what goes down behind the scenes on big productions. And for a hot minute, the narrative was firmly in Blake's favor. But then things shifted. The countersuit dropped. More info leaked. The PR angle started feeling less like a Survivor story and more like a calculated legal and media chess move. And I'm not saying nothing happened. I'm not dismissing Blake's experience entirely. But what I am saying is that the way this case has evolved, especially with the 47, this whole 47-1 claim? Yeah, it starts looking less like a justice mission and more like someone desperate to cash out from this disaster. Because here's the cold truth. The original lawsuit is toast. Case dismissed. Blake Lively didn't win that fight the way she probably dreamed she would. And now this 47. One motion is basically her last gasp. Her final card to play. If Judge Lyman rules for her, she could strut away with serious money. If he rules against her, or decides she can't even use this law the way she's trying to, then this whole circus ends with Blake getting absolutely nothing. And honestly, after everything, all the headlines, the court filings, the PR wars, walking away empty-handed would be a very different ending than what her team probably pictured when this all kicked off. And oh, Ryan Reynolds is floating somewhere in this mess too. Tons of speculation about how this case has hit both of them, their brand, their public image. Because when you're married to someone at the center of a lawsuit, this ugly good luck staying clean. Ryan has been pretty quiet through most of this. Smartest move he could make. But the financial stakes here aren't just Blake's. Whatever happens in that courtroom on June 1st hits both of them. Now, the letters both sides have to submit by May 31st, the day before the hearing, those are going to be delicious. Kevin Fritz, one of the sharper legal minds on Justin Baldoni's side throughout this case, is about to get a real moment. 2 pages, single-spaced, lay out your argument, then show up and defend it in person. That's it. That's the whole damn assignment. And I genuinely think the quality of those letters will matter. Judge Lyman asked for specific cases, not long-winded explanations, not fancy footnotes. He wants to see the law. He wants to be pointed in a direction. So whoever does a better job of saying, here's the case law, here's why the burden falls the way we say it does, here's whether 47. One even applies here. That side walks into that courtroom with a real advantage. The 30-minute argument structure is also fun to think about. Half an hour each? That's nothing when you're dealing with questions this messy. There's the question of whether Blake can even use 47. One, through the federal procedural rule she's invoking. There's the question of who carries the burden of proof. There's the question of whether the burden shifts depending on what kind of damages you're chasing. And then there's the question of how that burden actually gets discharged, meaning what does it actually look like in practice to prove your case? Judge Lyman literally asks them to tackle that last point too. Oh, he wants to know how this would work, not in theory, but step by step. That level of picky detail from a judge? Yeah, it tells you something. He's not here for grand speeches about fairness or Hollywood power games. He wants the guts. He wants the legal blueprint. He wants someone to walk him through exactly how this mess is supposed to function under the law, because if he's about to set a precedent, he wants it rock solid. And that hospital custodian case keeps coming back to me. Because that judge had someone standing right there who was exactly who 47. One was written for a regular nobody. Not famous, not wealthy, no PR machine, just a person who reported something gross and then got sued for it. And even in that situation, the amount owed got settled behind closed doors. The triple damages, the punitive piece? None of that ever got fully tested. So Blake Lively is basically asking Judge Lyman to go further than any judge has ever gone with this law, in a case that looks nothing like what the law was originally built to handle. That is a bold freaking ask. And Judge Lyman, from everything we've seen of him throughout this circus, does not exactly strike me as someone who high-fives bold asks that aren't glued to solid legal reasoning. He's going to want that argument to hold up. He's going to want that precedent to make actual sense. And if Blake Lively's team cannot convincingly explain why she, specifically her, in this specific disaster, deserves the full nuclear weight of 47. One applied in her favor, including triple punitive damages, I genuinely don't know how he rules for her. And that's the part that makes June 1st so ridiculously interesting to think about, because walking into that courtroom, both sides know exactly what's at stake. This isn't some preliminary hearing. This isn't a procedural formality. This is the last conversation. Whatever crawls out of that room is final. There are no appeals waiting on the other side. There's no next filing, no next motion, no next opportunity to reframe the narrative. Judge Lyman is going to hear 30 minutes from each side. And then, at some point after that, he's going to write his decision, and that decision is going to be it for Blake Lively. Meaning everything she's been building toward with this 47. 1. Claim either pays off or it doesn't. And I think that pressure is real because Blake Lively came into this lawsuit clutching a very specific public image she was trying to protect. And the way this case has unraveled, yeah, that precious image has taken some serious bruises. The sympathy she enjoyed at the start? Way more complicated now. People have questions they never had before. And honestly, the only thing that might feel like a clean exit for Blake Lively at this point is a financial victory. Something she can hold up and scream, "See? I was right. The court backed me. Here's your proof." Without that, this whole chapter of her life just drifts into awkward ambiguity. And I don't think Blake handles ambiguity well. For Justin Baldoni's side, the mission is simple. They want to walk out without owing Blake a single dollar. And let's be real. Based on the questions Judge Lyman is raising in his order, they might actually have a fighting chance. If the judge decides Blake can't even use 47, the way she's trying to, the whole motion implodes. Doesn't matter who has the burden of proof. Doesn't matter how damages get calculated. None of it matters if the foundation is garbage. And that, assuming without deciding language at the top of his order, that's a pretty clear signal he hasn't convinced himself the foundation is solid yet. What's also worth noting, this hearing is happening in public, in a courtroom at 500 Pearl Street, and people are going to fill those seats. Not just lawyers or journalists, but actual folks who followed this saga from day one and want to watch the end with their own eyes. There's something almost theatrical about it, and I mean that sincerely. This case has been so public, so loud, so thoroughly live documented across social media, news outlets, and legal commentary channels that it makes a weird kind of sense for it to end in a room where people can actually watch. And what happens after the hearing? That's its own question. Judge Lyman has no deadline to issue his ruling. He could take days. He could take weeks. And that waiting period will be an event in itself, because the internet isn't going silent while everyone holds their breath. There will be analysis, speculation, hot takes from every direction. Every word spoken in that courtroom will get dissected. Every expression, every pause, every moment one lawyer looks more confident than the other. All of it turned into content. That's just the world this case lives in now. But at the end of all that noise, what really matters is what Judge Lyman actually writes. And I think he's going to pen something razor sharp, something that leaves almost no wiggle room, because he knows this decision will get cited for years. He knows the next time some celebrity tries to wield 47, one in a federal court, or the next time a regular person tries to use it, whoever's making that argument will yank out his ruling and build their whole case around it. That's a heavyweight responsibility, and everything about how he's handled this mess suggests he takes that duty dead seriously. So what does all this mean for Blake Lively in the bigger picture? Because beyond the legal outcome, there's a reputation mess this case has stirred up that no court ruling can actually fix. People have already formed opinions about Blake through this process, and those aren't changing based on what Judge Lyman decides. If she wins the cash, there will still be crowds convinced the whole thing was a calculated power play. If she loses, there will still be people who feel she was genuinely wronged somewhere in all of this. The court can settle the legal question, but public opinion? That's a whole separate monster. And that one doesn't come with a judge. What I keep circling back to is how wildly different this ending looks from what anyone probably imagined when this all started. A dismissed case, a last-minute hearing on a California law being dragged into a New York federal court, 30 minutes each to make your final argument, and then silence while you wait for a ruling that will outlive the headlines. It's not the dramatic courtroom saga some people expected. It's quieter than that, and somehow that makes it feel way more significant. Blake Lively walked into this believing she had a story worth telling and a case worth fighting. Justin Baldoni walked in believing he'd been wronged and was willing to say so publicly. And Judge Lyman sat right in the middle of it all, reading every filing, weighing every argument, and now asking one final question. Does this law even apply here? And if it does, who has to prove it? That question gets answered on June 1st. And whatever comes after, this case has already changed something. It pushed a California law into federal court territory where it had never really been tested. It forced a judge to build legal architecture from scratch in a very public, very high-profile setting. And it reminded everyone watching that even in cases that feel like pure celebrity drama and Hollywood politics, the law moves slowly, carefully, and entirely on its own terms. Blake Lively's name is going to be in case law. That's just a fact now, no matter how the ruling goes. And honestly, knowing everything we know about how this whole thing played out, that might be the most unexpected plot twist of all.